Hello and welcome to the Banker's View from SWIFT Latin American Regional Conference. I'm Silvia Pavoni, Economics Editor of The Banker, and I'm joined by Margaret Myers, who is the head of the China-Latin America program at the Inter-American Dialogue. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Silvia.
So I want to ask you about China. China has become a key trade partner and investment partner as well for Latin America. How is this relationship going to develop?
Well, for many years now, China's been saying that it's going to diversify its investment in Latin America, and indeed it's starting to do so. Trade continues to rise. Investment overall is sort of plateaued, but we're seeing a real diversification into a wider variety of sectors. So what used to be, an interest almost entirely in primary commodities, be it soy or copper or oil, now we see, far more interest in a much wider variety of industries, including tech, an increasingly wide variety of infrastructure development, not just major dams and large road and rail, but also other forms of infrastructure development. For example, ultra-high voltage transmission lines, things of that nature. And so with that in mind, I think we'll see, potentially a greater contribution on the part of China to regional growth, depending upon the type of the project and how it's managed.
And so this has clearly caught the eye of others around the world, most obviously the United States, who not so long ago has invoked the Monroe Doctrine, which has not particularly been welcomed by Latin American countries, but some Latin American governments, I'm thinking for example about Brazil with Jair Bolsonaro, apparently would prefer to deal with a trade and investment partner such as the US rather than China. So we're going to see this becoming an escalation of political tensions, geopolitical tensions. Where is that going to place Latin America within the broader US-China discussion?
Yeah, I mean, Latin American countries, Latin American governments are in a very difficult position right now. They're facing a lot of pressure by the US government to not engage too extensively with China, especially in particularly sensitive sectors, things like technology, telecommunications, and on infrastructure projects and infrastructure finance. The US views those projects as particularly problematic and as affecting overall US influence in the region. That said, the reality is such that, the region at this point in time depends rather significantly on China, and in ways that are very different from its relationship with the United States. And these ties are not something that the U.S. is going to be able to break, through discussions with regional governments, with leaders in Latin America, despite many efforts to do so. And the U.S. cannot replace China in Latin America, despite some new laws and initiatives to try to engage more extensively in the infrastructure sector through things like the BUILD Act and otherwise. What the U.S. is looking to do at this point in time is to work with Latin American governments to try and ensure best outcomes by improving, ideally, assuming all of this works out, regulatory capacity, fighting corruption, things of that nature, to ensure that any contracts that are negotiated, whether with China or other actors, are carried out well.
I also want to ask you about Venezuela. So China has become a very important lender to Venezuela. Once and hopefully soon the situation in Venezuela will be resolved, where do you think is going to leave China and whichever administration will replace the current one? Assuming, of course, this will happen.
Sure. China has very clearly placed its bets at this point in time, at least on Maduro. It has indicated a strong preference for Maduro in international settings, support for that government. Simply because it's aiming to achieve stability in whatever form, and it sees stability at the moment as the status quo. And in that sense, is seeking to maintain that level of that type of relationship as long as possible. At the same time, it understands that there is tremendous prospect for change in Venezuela, at least inevitably, but it could take a long time. And so there are back channels that China has developed with the opposition and with others to understand what's happening on the ground, to be able to develop a sort of plan B in the event of some sort of transition.
So China keeping it ready to deal with whichever administration will be in charge of Venezuela.
Yeah, I mean, they're inclined to deal with whomever is in power, but at the moment they judge the status quo as the best option.
Very well. Thank you so much for your comments.
Thank you.